Welcome to the OMG Tarot podcast. I'm your host, Lindsay, aka OMG Tarot. As I teased last week, this week's episode is all about love readings. Love readings are one of the most common types of readings I do, and it makes sense. People love love. People have relationships. People want to be in relationships. People want to know how they can get relationships and make their existing ones the best they can possibly be. When they turn to the tarot, they want insight and they want to know, is this the right person for me? Are we going to have a long-term relationship, or maybe even get engaged or get married? Or are they actually a really bad choice for me, and should I cut my losses right now? These are all questions that are totally valid and questions you can address with the tarot. With love readings, it's extra important to stick to your ethics because you're dealing with people's feelings here. You don't want to inadvertently insult someone or cross an ethical boundary. As we discussed a bit in a recent episode, one ethical boundary that a lot of readers maintain is not reading for somebody who's not present in the room. So in other words, if somebody comes to you and says, "Can you do a reading for my boyfriend?" and the boyfriend's not standing right there, the reader would probably say, "No, I don't feel comfortable with that because he didn't come here and consent to the reading, and he's not here to hear what I have to say anyway." A good way to get around this is to reframe the question as, what do I need to know about my relationship with my boyfriend? Or how can I create the best relationship with my boyfriend? That's all I'm going to say here because we did already talk about this in greater detail in a recent episode, and I don't want to waste your time rehashing old content. Go back and listen to last week's episode, the one that dropped on February 6th, because that's where I talk a lot more about how to formulate good questions for a tarot card reading. But what about other potential ethical pitfalls in a tarot card reading? Maybe somebody comes and asks you, "Hey, I've started seeing someone on the side. Should I pursue this?" Yes, this is actually something that's happened to me before. And this is where you want to read the cards accurately and objectively, but also you're a person and you have your own moral code and you don't want to condone certain behaviors. I'd say with this, if it gets to an ethically yucky area for you, you can always say, "I'm not comfortable reading about that." That's always an option for you, no matter what the querent asks. And what if they ask something like, "Am I being cheated on?" Or, "Should I be suspicious of my partner?" If you feel comfortable looking into the cards for this, by all means, do it. You don't need my permission. This is one area, though, where I would advise you to not be so emphatic in your reading. So by that I mean, let's say you pull up the Seven of Swords, the Five of Swords, any sort of card that kind of indicates that, yeah, some information might be being held from you. I probably wouldn't jump to, "Yes, you're absolutely being cheated on," but I might make my querent aware that they don't have the full story and that there is some valid information out there that they don't currently have and that it would behoove them to find it. Because I think this also gets into the sticky issue of telling your querent what to do. I always emphasize that I'm going to read the cards, but I can't tell you how to live your life. Whatever actions that you choose to take after this reading are entirely out of your own free will. But if I do see in the cards that there's a reason to be a bit suspicious or perhaps investigate some information further, I'm going to tell them that because they asked. So that too, if somebody asks something, they want to know. Don't feel like you need to sugarcoat it for their sake if what you find isn't exactly savory. They came and they asked for it. Respect them enough to give them an accurate, non-sugar-coated answer that is going to be valuable to them. So then, what happens if you do a reading and you find something that's not great? As I just mentioned, respect your querent enough to deliver bad news. Do so with sensitivity, but remember, they didn't come to you to have you blow smoke up their butt or tell them what they wanted to hear. They came to hear what the cards have to say about their situation, and I think that being truthful with them is being respectful toward them. And also, this can be a bit of an ego check for you as well, because Who are you to decide what's not great? You might come into this with the perspective of, oh, a positive love reading is one that says, yes, of course, they're the one for you. This is wonderful. You're going to get married and have a wonderful, beautiful life together. But the reality is that might not be what your querent is thinking. Here's a really great example from an event I was reading at a couple summers ago. A young lady came to my booth and sat down and asked me, are my boyfriend and I going to be together for the long term? Or she might have asked, what's the future of my relationship? It was something along those lines. And so we flipped up the cards, and I don't remember which specific cards they were, but the gist was that no, her relationship with her boyfriend was not going to continue for the long term, and that it was ultimately going to be a good thing for her because it's going to allow her to pursue her own interests and her own career more deeply. If any, that sounds like hermit energy, so maybe she had the hermit in there. But I was kind of sort of cringing a little inside because, of course, I want every reading to be yes, yes, love, beautiful, of course. But my duty is to read the cards. So I read them as I saw them, which was that no, I don't see this being a relationship that you're in for the long term, but I don't necessarily see it ending badly. I saw it kind of ending with the two of them just going in different directions in their lives and deciding that it wasn't working between them anymore. And I delivered this news carefully, and I hoped that she would take it well. And she took it surprisingly well. And she was like, you know what? That's what I needed to hear because he's in the military, and I've been back and forth on whether I should move with him to go be with him at his next place he's stationed at. And doing so would mean having to put my studies on hold and perhaps transfer to a different university over at where he's stationed. And I'm just really not quite sure because I'm pretty committed to what I'm doing here. And so I breathed a sigh of relief that I wasn't about to get blamed for causing people to break up. And we ended the reading on what felt like a very positive note. She wasn't dismayed or discouraged. It felt like my reading had affirmed what she already kind of knew and maybe gave her the courage and the confidence to just know that that's quite likely how life is going to unfold. So be confident in the readings you do. Trust that you're providing valuable advice, and also just remember the human. Be sensitive. Deliver messages the way you yourself would want to receive them. So I know I've mentioned a few specific cards in this podcast so far, such as the Hermit and the Five of Seven of Swords. Which cards do you want to see in a love reading? And conversely, which cards don't you want to see in a love reading? Now, of course, you could make the argument that any card could be a positive or a negative card to pull in a love reading, depending on which other cards it's been pulled with and which question you've asked. But also, let's not pretend that there aren't certain cards that you'd probably really like to see in a love reading. I'm talking the Two of Cups, the Four of Wands, the Ace of Cups, the Ace of Pentacles, and then, of course, the one we all want to see, the Lovers. And why? Well, because look at these cards individually. We know the cups are the suit that has to do with emotions, and so naturally, you're gonna see a lot of cups cards showing up in love readings. But what if you don't? I don't think that's necessarily a bad sign. A relationship isn't always just emotional. In fact, the best relationships aren't. That's why I'd like to see an Ace of Pentacles, because think about it. An Ace of Pentacles is starting something new and something that's going to last for a long time. It's putting down those roots and planning for the future. So if somebody were to ask me, is this relationship going to last? And they pulled the Ace of Pentacles, I would say, I think this is a really good sign for you. And yes, you're looking at long-term stability. I would also read that into the Four of Pentacles because that one's all about saving and planning and looking forward toward a brighter future because you're working hard today. I'd read similar themes into cards like the Seven of Pentacles and the Nine of Pentacles. If somebody pulls the Nine of Pentacles with regard to their relationship, I would say you're surrounded by abundance and you have everything that you need. But here's an example of why context matters so much. Let's say we pulled the Nine of Pentacles in a love spread, but the context was more so, what are we each getting out of this relationship? Or what are both partners' perspectives of each other? Depending on the context, I think you can make an argument to read a Nine of Pentacles here as a sugar baby situation. Somebody who views their partner as someone who will provide them with everything and just expect them to create the abundance. Now, for me to jump to such an extreme reading, I'd have to see what other card it's pulled up with. Maybe an Ace of Swords, maybe a Three of Swords. And in fact, I know the swords kind of get a bad rap for being an unromantic suit, and they are, but maybe they're necessary in a love reading, because maybe that Three of Swords, which is probably the most unromantic card you could pull, I mean, maybe not, maybe the Hanged Man. I'm going to have to think about that. What's the most unromantic card in this deck? But it might give you the insight that you need to be able to assess your relationship critically and make choices that are in your own best interest. Like, to bring it back to that example from earlier where the young lady was not sure if her relationship would last because her boyfriend was getting stationed elsewhere and she was in the midst of a college program here. A card like a Three of Swords is actually some clarity, and it's affirmation that you see the situation exactly how it is, that you're not delusional about anything. So I think swords can be helpful in a love reading. As far as wands, that's the suit we haven't picked on a bit. It's about passion and it's about drive. So, for the most part, wands are not a bad thing to get in your love reading. However, let's walk through a couple scenarios where they're not great. Our Nine of Wands. Ugh, that guy's really been through it, hasn't he? This relationship has really taken its toll on you, hasn't it? Or perhaps just life in general has taken its toll on you, and you're really not in a good place to be starting a new relationship. However, context matters. Maybe he's showing up to show that this couple has survived all kinds of things. They've put up with all kinds of trials and tribulations, and they're still standing like those people in that song Bon Jovi wrote so long ago. Similarly, Ten of Wands. That's a lot on one person's shoulders, and if you want to read it just like that, a lot on one person's shoulders, that does not bode well for a love reading. But maybe it's a message of perseverance. And a Cups card isn't automatically great for a love reading. Your Five of Cups. This relationship is rather unbalanced. Maybe that's what you needed to know. But also there is a way through it. You do have that bridge over the water. Seven of Cups. Are you really being realistic here? Do you need to be? Trust the messages that the cards are telling you. I think in any tarot pull that you do, the cards that you pull are going to communicate their unique message to you, even if they aren't necessarily cards that you would traditionally associate with love or a relationship, like our Ace of Cups. This is also why I don't read reversals, which we'll talk about more in another episode because it's not really super relevant here, but just know that my decision to not read reversals ties in closely with this idea that the cards are going to tell you what they need to tell you. What about major arcana cards? Which ones of those do you want to see in a love reading, or not want to see? Similar to the minor arcana cards, it's all about context. However, there are certain major cards that I think are really hopeful for a love spread, and other ones that are not great. You can probably guess the major arcana card that's the least encouraging to see in a love spread. Take a moment to think about that. Did you say the Hermit? Because I was thinking the Hermit. Maybe you said the Tower, maybe you said Death. Hey, all valid, but think about the Hermit. He's literally a hermit. Sometimes the cards are really on the nose, and I don't know how you get any worse for a relationship than the cards saying, yeah, hermit energy. I know I mentioned Death in the Tower, and yeah, not great. These can be some breakup-y cards, and if I were to read a bit of nuance into them, I might read Death as the querent being the one doing the breaking up, and the Tower being the querent being the one getting broken up with. However, depending on the question the querent asked, I don't read these as necessarily more negative than the Hermit. The Hermit's pretty clear. The Hermit is cutting themselves off from other people so they can focus on themselves and find what's true. Versus, let's take a look at the Tower. maybe the tower is showing that your partner and you are going to undergo an upheaval and have to rebuild from the ground up. It doesn't necessarily mean you're breaking up, depending on what other cards we've pulled with it and what you've asked. Similarly, maybe death is more so referring to other things outside your relationship that are affecting both of you that you need to get rid of in order to move forward as a healthier, stronger couple. And I realize that I'm phrasing a lot of these as if the querent is already in a relationship. What if they're single and they've asked the tarot cards, how can I find a relationship? Or what do I need as I navigate the dating pool? In this case, maybe death is actually kind of a reassuring card to get because it's saying, hey, you need to work on yourself, and in doing that, you need to get rid of certain things in order to usher in relationships. I know it sounds daunting, and I realize I'm looking at this from a tarot card reader's perspective. I think a lot of tarot card readers actually kind of like the death card because it has that make room for rebirth and the next phase, and it's this card of renewal. But anyway, what other major arcana cards do I want to see in a love reading? The obvious one, the Lovers. I don't even think we need to talk about that because, duh, that's simple. I actually kind of like the Fool, especially for somebody who's diving into the dating pool either after ending a relationship or for the first time because it's fresh and the world is your oyster. And yeah, you're probably diving into the unknown, but you're letting yourself be vulnerable and open to new experiences. I think if somebody pulls the Fool, my advice to them would be go for it. Dive into the unknown. Put yourself out there. Don't worry so much about not knowing where you're going to land. That's the whole point of this. Also, the World. The World is moving into the next phase, and this is one that I'd probably be more likely to see for people who are in a relationship already, because I would read this as moving into the next phase of that relationship. So this might be a dating couple getting engaged, or an engaged couple getting married, or even just a long-term couple moving in together, buying a house together, starting a family together. Anything that's significant of them going from one phase into the next and then staying in that next permanent phase of their lives. Other majors I think I'd like to see in a relationship spread are the Empress and the Emperor. You really can't go wrong with either of them. The Emperor is direct and clear on what he wants, and the Empress is nurturing and she's willing to put in the work to build a beautiful relationship. The Sun, I would read that as be yourself. I think this one would be more likely to show up for somebody who's dating, but maybe if they ask, what does my partner think about me? I would say, well, they love you for who you are. You're uninhibited, just pure, creative, unique self. They love that about you. And for someone who's entering the dating world, I would say something similar. Show up authentically, show up as yourself, because that's what the Sun is all about. The Moon? Maybe not. The Moon is about looking inward. The Moon is the shadow of the Sun, and this one, to me, might say it's actually time to look inward and reflect on yourself. And maybe if you're in a relationship, reflect on it, understand it, and really challenge it, stress test it. Understand, is this genuinely in your best interest? Or for somebody not in a relationship, same thing. Look inward about yourself. Do the work on yourself, because right now it's all about you. It's not really about you in a relationship. I think you need to work on yourself in order to be able to show up authentically in a relationship and advocate for what you want. I think maybe the Moon for a single person might be showing up to say, perhaps that what you thought you wanted isn't actually what you need. And maybe it's time to reflect on that and understand, all right, well, what do I actually need? What's actually in my best interest? And what's going to bring me joy and fulfillment? A couple other cards that might or might not be great for a love spread. The Devil. Because remember, the Devil is all about false promises, and he can point to being chained up to something that you know isn't good for you, but also chained up to something that, despite not being good for you, is addictive, and you love it, and you have to keep coming back time and time again. The Devil could be your ex who keeps coming back into your life, or that toxic relationship that you just can't get yourself out of because something about it is just fun. In fact, one of my good friends, a fellow tarot card reader whose business is called Untethered Guidance, had a really great take on the devil in a love reading in a recent blog post she did. Go check it out. Her website is amynovak.com, AMYNOVACK.com, and you can give her a follow on Instagram if you're interested. It's untethered_guidance. Give the post a read, and give the rest of her blog a read because, honestly, it's all really great content. So while the devil might be spicy and sexy and hot, and maybe just a short-term fling, you know what other card I really don't want to see in a love reading? The Hanged Man. And it's for a very similar reason to the Hermit. Think about it. And maybe the Hanged Man is even worse because the Hanged Man is just hanging out upside down, watching everybody else, and just observing. The Hanged Man is the card that's like, you will be alone on Valentine's Day, and you'll be scrolling through your Instagram feed, looking at everybody's dates and flowers and shiny new engagement rings, and what do you have? Your video games and some microwave popcorn, all by yourself. Another card that I really don't love in a love reading, and this one might be a little more controversial, and if you disagree, tell me why. Seriously, sound off in the comments, DM me, because I love hearing others' perspectives on tarot topics and tarot cards. So here it is, the Star. And here's my rationale. The Star is so independent. It's Aquarius energy, and who is Aquarius? The rebel and the detached one. This is the one who feels like an outside observer watching humanity happen. And this card can often symbolize needing to go out on your own and needing to cast off all of society's norms and expectations for you because the box doesn't fit you. So you need to build a different box and one that fits around you. You need to dance the beat of your own drum. So if I saw this in a love reading, I might read this as the person needs to be a bit more independent and focused on themselves and what works for them. Really not dissimilar to the moon, but I think the difference here is the moon is more about looking inward and understanding yourself and your needs, versus the star is a bit more action-oriented. It's, all right, I have looked inside, and now I'm going to go out and do things that are in my best interests, which I know in tarot, the star actually comes before the moon, but in this case, I'm just seeing it as, well, you already know what you need in order to go do star stuff. What about the court cards? I would read them as, who are you in a relationship with or potentially entering a relationship with? Depending on the context, they might also be, who are you in this relationship? And in fact, there's a relationship spread that I absolutely love that I'm going to share with you all, but because it's a spread and you have to look at it, I'm going to share it on my Instagram and on my blog. So I might not get those up today, which if you're listening on the day this drops, it is February 14th, 2025, but keep an eye out, and that's all the more reason to follow me on Instagram or sign up for my mailing list, which I'm actually going to be migrating over to Substack soon, so keep an eye out, and right now you can still sign up on my website, which is omgtarot.com, but it's not time for self-promotion yet. Let's stay focused on the court cards. As you know, they're personas, they're people, they're who are you and what role are you playing. So when court cards come up in a love spread, I would pay attention to them and read them in this precise way. Who are you in this relationship? Who is your partner or prospective partner? And this might be how you find good cards to be significators for you and your partner. Significators are cards that symbolize specific individuals. The love spread that I'm going to share is one that uses significators. And when you're doing a spread, if you're doing one kind of like the one that I'm going to share, you actually take them out of the deck deliberately to be a visual guide for you and to make sure that significator is part of the spread. Significators can also become part of your tarot vocabulary. So the more you work with your deck and the more you build up a relationship with it, the more you might start to have personal meanings for the cards. This could be something like zeroing in on a particular part of a card's textbook meaning, like maybe for you, every time you see the Fool, your eye automatically goes to that little white dog. And for you, the Fool means what it means, a fresh start, but it also has this connotation of you're never alone and you're being guided and protected by a loyal companion. You might tend to overemphasize this companionship aspect of the Fool, whereas another reader might not focus on that quite as much. Or you might associate certain cards with different seasons or different months of the year. Think back to the episode I did where we talked a bit about timing questions and associating different cards with seasons. That's how you find your system that works for you. You're building out your personal tarot vocabulary that when you start working with your deck and you pull out cards, they have their meaning that's very unique to you. This doesn't necessarily mean make up your own set of definitions for the cards, but more like your personal interpretation, or maybe even a better way to put that would be your own personal translation of the cards, because it's the little nuances and the little gray areas and all those things that make the messages resonate with you. Court cards are a big part of this, and you might find that your partner always shows up in readings you do for yourself as the Knight of Cups or the Queen of Wands. And then when you do future polls for yourself, even if they're not explicitly relationship-related polls, you might see that significator and the cards might be saying, hey, your partner is part of this message. Pay attention to them and their thoughts and their perspectives on whatever issue it is you're reading about. Some readers also use major arcana cards as significators. I typically don't. And if that resonates with you, great, absolutely. Use major cards as significators. The only time I ever really use a major card as a significator is when I'm reading about a specific time frame or energy. So let's say I want to do a reading about Aries season, and hey, how's Aries season gonna go for me? I might pull out the Emperor and use him as a significator. In fact, maybe I'll do an episode in the future specifically about significators. So that about wraps it up for our discussion on love spreads today. I hope it was helpful, and if you're doing love spreads this weekend, I hope they are wonderful. I hope you get all the insight and clarity you need, no matter what that message happens to be. And if you're celebrating with a sweetheart this weekend, I hope you have a great time. I hope you have a fantastic Valentine's Day, and if for you it's more of a Galentine's Day or a family celebration or just hanging out with friends, I hope you have a great time too. Oh God, I think I'm listening to too much Delilah these days. Honestly, I've been a big Delilah fan almost my whole life. Listening to her and some other talk radio is really what made me want to be a podcaster, so fun fact about me. But anyway, it's been fun hanging out, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Heads up, next week there will not be a podcast because I'm actually going to be at a wedding that whole weekend, Thursday through Monday, so no OMG next week, but I'll catch you the following week, which will be Thursday, February 27th. In the meantime, if you want to stay up to date with me, follow me on Instagram, where my handle is its_OMG_tarot. You can also head over to my website, omgtarot.com, and if you need a reminder of the other reader who I mentioned and her totally awesome blog post that really gets into different cards for love spreads and how you might want to interpret them, her handle is untethered_guidance, and the website is amynovak.com. That's amynovak.com. Alrighty, I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.